Hi all, I'm Kim, and this is my channel where I explore my many interests. Today's video is about my experience crocheting and knitting clothes for the first time, what I learned and what I do differently. As a kid, I've always loved making things with my hands and crafting. I picked up crochet at around 11 and then tried to teach myself knitting and failed horribly at it. But now that I'm older, I reattempted knitting in the last few years. My crochet skills are still that of an 11-year-old's though. So keep that in mind moving forward. I chose to make mostly just crop tops because I thought it'd be a good place to start to build out my skill set. The first top I made was this granny square crop top. So my goal for this was pretty much to just make a top out of granny squares. I already knew how to make these squares from making a giant blanket out of them as a kid. Once I had 16 of these squares, I single crocheted all the sides together. I did a row of double crochets on the top and bottom, and I also did 2 rows of double crochets for the straps. At first I did the same for the hem, but I found that using double crochets just gave it too much tension. So this project I actually learned how to do ribbing, which is just single crochets in the back loop only. For the size and fit, I was really happy with how loose and relaxed it felt. Although because they are granny squares, there's some big holes, so you'd still have to wear an undershirt or a bralette underneath. But I think it's really cute and really comfortable. The only thing was that there's so many ends from all the different color changes, so that was kind of annoying to weave in, but definitely manageable. And if I were to do it again, I'd do it the exact same way. For this next top, I followed Shenda DIY's tutorial, but I followed it pretty loosely because I used a different type of yarn and changed a few other things. One of the differences is that I put my seam on the back because I thought it would be nice and symmetrical, but it actually created this seam that is not that pretty. If I were to do it again, I'd put the seam on the side under your arm where it would be covered. I also have this dark thread in my yarn skein, and I thought once I crochet it in you won't really notice, but it did create this dark area in it, so next time I would definitely cut out imperfections in my yarn. I also found that because of my yarn's texture being soft and slippery, it gave the material more stretch, and on top of that, the double crochets are slightly looser of a stitch, so the fabric it created ended up being more drapey and stretchy than I expected and less structured because of my yarn choice, which was acrylic. I also just wanted to say that I am not critiquing the patterns I used in any way. This is just my experience making clothes for the first time and learning how to make them fit my body, and I also followed the patterns quite loosely because I used different yarn and made adjustments to fit my body. Even though I adjusted the stitch count to fit my body, once completed, the top ended up more loose and flowy than I had planned, which is why I downsized my hook on the next project. But this is a reason and an example why you should always swatch your yarn first. So if I were to do it again, I'd put the seam on the side, I'd cut out yarn imperfections, and I'd swatch for the stretch and the draping of the fabric. For this next top, I followed Crochet with Carrie's Eden crop top pattern. So I should have taken what I learned from the last one and swatched for stretch and draping, but since I made this one consecutively after, I was feeling pretty confident that I just needed to size down my hook. From the recommended hook size in the pattern, I believed I sized down a full 1.5 millimeters. Once I completed the top, I found that the fabric I created actually had too much structure this time. Because single crochets are a tighter stitch, the smaller stitch already creates more tension than the larger double crochet stitches I had in my last project. So I probably didn't need to size down the hook as much as I did. Or alternatively, I could have swapped the single crochets for double crochets and kept approximately the same size hook. The other outcome was that the armhole hems kind of puffed out more aggressively than I had expected, so after the shirt was completed, I cut the middle of the armhole and extended it to recreate the fold-over effect that's in the front and the back, which I think looks pretty good. I'm still super happy with the result though. It's an adorable crop top and I would recommend this pattern to anyone who crochets. If I were to do it again, I would swatch for stretch and draping, and maybe even switch the single crochets in the base of the shirt to double crochets, just because it would crochet a little bit faster. For this top, I took inspiration from Pinterest. I saw this sweater vest by Vicky Knits, and I wanted to create my own, but with a more classic sweater vest shape, like in the image on the right. More boxy and a straight v-neck. I started by trying to figure out what is the ratio of v-neck to torso to hemline that I wanted, and then I measured those sections on my own body to get the measurements. After that, I swatched a small section to get how many inches 10 stitches would create horizontally and vertically. Once I had a swatch for scale, I could turn the inch measurements that I took into stitch measurements. So this is the drawing that I created from that. Once this was all knitted up, I was pretty happy with the result, but I found I wanted the waistline to cinch more. For the shoulders and the neckline, I used a set of smaller needles to make this area tighter, but I didn't do this for the waistline. I didn't want to completely undo my project, so I was thinking maybe I can cut away the ribbing. I'd seen a video where someone was using their magic knitting loom, and they actually crocheted in every single stitch at the bottom so that they could cut away the test yarn. So I thought maybe this is the exact technique that I need to use. I crocheted a single stitch in every single stitch above the white yarn, and then I cut away the ribbing. Once that was done, I reknit all the ribbing with smaller needles. This gave me the cinching I wanted, but it also created the same problem that my first project had initially, which was too much tension in the waistline, making it tight and quite hard to pull over your body. If I were to do it again, I would start with fewer stitches on the bottom hemline and increase for the main body of the sweater vest. That way I would be able to get the cinching I wanted and also be able to keep the needle size consistent throughout. And same applying the inverse to the armhole and the neck holes. I would reduce the number of stitches and keep the needle size the same. I'd probably also make the hem solid instead of having a black stripe go through it, because with my yarn the line was just not that clean looking, so I would just make it a solid color next time. For this next top, I was inspired by an image I found on Pinterest of Liz and Hook's Sunburst Mosaic Bralette. This was more experimental. I just wanted to see if I could make it without the pattern because I had successfully made my other granny square crop top, and that was pretty much just freehanding. So this was more of just a personal challenge. At the start, I didn't know how to make a sunburst granny square. I tried a bunch of different things and they kind of changed halfway through, so all the squares and half squares turned out a little bit different. But overall, not really a bad result. Like, I would still wear this out. It's really cute. It's just, if you crochet, I think you could probably be able to tell some of the unevenness. So I do plan on making this again, and I have since bought the pattern, so I will be definitely recreating this one. I hope you enjoyed this video and were able to learn from some of my mistakes. I'm going to be posting more of this kind of content, so like and subscribe if you want to follow along and become better at knitting and crocheting with me. If you want to see more of my dog Stella, she has her very own TikTok, Stella the Dorky. Mostly it's just silly dog videos. My craft Instagram is Sephia Sun Threads, which I have started recently, but I'm going to be posting there more regularly, so follow if you want more frequent crocheting and knitting updates. Have a wonderful day. Bye!